I'm Steph Garcia Cichosz with D1 Ticker, and I'm joined today by Terry Prentice, Senior Associate AD for Athlete Brand Development and Inclusive Excellence at Arkansas. Terry, thank you so much for being here.
Great to be here today.
We're excited to be at the NIL Summit, Year One coming to a conclusion. I'm really intrigued by your title. There is this rise in the hiring of NIL-specific staff members in athletic departments. Tell us a little bit about what you do for Arkansas.
Yeah, Hunter Yurchek loves clever titles. If you look, you'll see all of our senior staff members have quite a bit to what they do. But athlete brand development, inclusive excellence, athlete brand development's just name, image, and likeness, and all that is wrapped up into that. So helping student athletes maximize their brands, and then inclusive excellence, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I work alongside Dorita Ratcliffe-Dawkins, our SWA, Dr. Chris Bader, who serves as our assistant AD for sports psychology, and we all work collaboratively on DEI work, and then just serve as a utility player for the athletic department.
Walk us through a day in your life. What are some of the fires you have to put out? What are some of the great challenges you get to take on? What questions are you getting from student athletes on a daily basis?
Yeah, it varies from day to day, but I would tell you, I might be talking to a coach, getting a call from one of our head coaches or an assistant coach or director of ops, might bump into a student athlete in the nutrition center. They might run by my office, have a question about, an NIL deal that they were proposed, or a question that they had about a contract that they were proposed. Might be talking to one of the head coaches, have sport oversight of, or might get a call from a parent or an agent or an attorney. I mean, the day really just varies based on what's going on. We have a staff, have two other members of our team, a coordinator and a graduate assistant, and so they actually can help me manage a lot of the day-to-day duties and navigate, conversations with student athletes and all the rest of the entities. But yeah, no day's different. It's really, I don't know, been an awesome 11 months. We could be talking to licensing, Learfield, our Razorback Foundation, student athlete development, compliance. I mean, really just try to be the central hub and just make sure that we put out the fires and make sure we keep the train rolling.
Well, NIL has so many different components. Your title includes brand development. There's marketing, as you mentioned, not necessarily for the school perspective, but there's sales, there's compliance. Which area really takes up the most space in your brain these days?
I'd probably say it's three parts. So when folks ask what we do, I liken it to we're 1/3 student athlete development. We have to have that mindset and mentality. We're 1/3 compliance and ensuring that we have accurate records and that student athletes are following our policies. And then we're 1/3 external. So we have to think like we're licensing. We have to think like a fundraiser. You have to be very, very communicative with businesses and brands and boosters and others. So yeah, I'd say all three of those morph into one. You just try to be that central hub, and it's hard to know a lot of those things, but we've got a lot of great, smart people around the table that help us with that.
Well, Arkansas has this fantastic program called Flagship to support student athletes with their NIL efforts. Tell me about the resources available to student athletes.
Yeah, so it begins with our Walton College of Business and our Office of Entrepreneurship and Innovation. They've been awesome partners across campus. They're willing and ready to help. Beyond that, we've got our own internal staff. So we have myself, 2 additional staff members, but we've also got our director of licensing. We have our compliance office. We have our general counsel. We have John Fagg, our deputy AD, who sits at our table as well. So really, we've got a host of individuals that are there willing to help student athletes. But we work and provide workshops on financial literacy, brand building, public speaking, things along those lines, and really just there to be a resource and a mentor to student athletes.
Well, as we see athletic departments across the country really bulk up their staff when it comes to NIL, how do we avoid overloading current staff members? How do we avoid that burnout of saying, you have all of these normal duties, let's add extra NIL stuff on top of it?
Yeah, I think it's imperative, if your department has the resources, to find an individual that could be that central hub that I mentioned earlier. Don't have to be an expert in any one particular field, but somebody that could just be a resource and a mentor to student athletes and earn some trust and earn some credibility with them and the coaching staffs. I think that's probably the best place you could start and avoid burnout by just trying to find one person that could take those responsibilities on and then use others to just help fill in the gaps as you can. But having one central person seems to be the direction, and I'm seeing more and more schools start to advertise for positions that have one central person. So I'd advocate for most to do that if you can.
Well, since you are that person for Arkansas, Is there a community of NIL professionals, NIL administrators kind of popping up around the country? Who are your peers in this space, and are they collaborative when it comes to best practices?
They are. They are. We're starting to see it. There's been a few of us that were hired either last spring or over the course of the summer in 2021. So as new announcements have been made and they come across a ticker or other places, we are all quick to email each other and try to catch up. But yeah, I know Jamal Walton at the University of Washington, Cam Cox at the University of Illinois. I know Oklahoma, Kansas is hiring a position right now, but even at the FCS level, I know Illinois State just had 2 positions that just came online, and they're all here at the NIL Summit, which has been awesome. So have a chance to trade notes, compare some best practices, and try to grow with each other.
So the state of Illinois just passed new legislation saying that athletic departments themselves can start facilitating deals for student athletes. Do you think that this is the future of NIL? Do you think that it should be on the athletic departments themselves to play this role?
Yeah, I think one of our approaches, and again, I got to give credit to Hunter, credit to John, credit to our Matt McCoy, our general counsel. We've been really aligned in our agreement that student athlete development and career development has been around, for quite a while. We help our student athletes with internships and jobs post-graduation or while they're in school. And we've started to see NIL being no different in that we're not the ones that dictate their salary, the compensation, what they're going to be earning. But if a business or a brand reaches out and wants to get in contact with a student athlete, we do feel a duty to play matchmaker a little bit and help them with that information. And if it works for the student athlete, great. If not, you do put the onus on them. But we've seen it being no different than what our student athlete development office has already been doing. So that's been our approach. So, I think you're going to see that continue to evolve in the space. We want to obviously do it the right way and make sure we're helping those across the department that want the opportunities. But we've seen it that way.
Well, Arkansas is one of the forward thinkers when it comes to NIL, but you're also in the SEC, which is probably the most competitive conference when it comes to NIL. Are there any metrics that you're using to kind of keep your eye on your SEC peers and evaluate what they're doing and try and see how Arkansas can continue to be on the forefront?
Yeah, I think one thing we have to think about departmentally is ensuring that as best we can, all 19 of our sports can benefit from name, image, and likeness. We have 15 great head coaches. They're all asking about it, even if they have international student athletes maybe that aren't able to partake right now. So we begin with making sure that all of our teams have an opportunity to engage in that area. And best we can tell over social media, we see that happening at some places, we don't see that happening others. But it's hard because we've got all of these different platforms. We have different states with different state laws, so some institutions can't necessarily promote the way that we might be able to on our social platforms. But that's the biggest thing I think we can do to be competitive as the SEC is use our social media to be able to bolster what our student athletes are doing and find ways to showcase them and support them.
What have been some of the more innovative NIL deals that you've seen from Razorback student athletes so far?
There have been a few. I love what our softball team was able to do with Everett Buick GMC, and that the entire team was able to partake in a deal, and that they were able to have success on the field, but then go ahead and maximize that. Be Unlimited from a licensing standpoint, done quite a bit of work with our student athletes from a merchandise standpoint. I'd point to the AAC, Athlete Advocate Consortium, that's worked with JD Notte from our men's basketball program. He's raised over $50,000 for the Samaritan's House, which is a cause that spoke to his personal life situation. So those have been some of the innovative things we've seen. WWE's been cool. We had 2 student athletes selected for that. So it's been a fun 11 months and come to the close of this first year.
Well, as we move into year 2, what issues are really on your mind right now? What are you paying most attention to?
Yeah, I think something that continues to keep us up at night is financial ramifications and the duties of our student athletes to pay their taxes and to make sure they're aware of what their obligations are. So that's something that continues to be on the forefront and how we educate towards that. Student athletes understanding their market value and not taking the first opportunity that comes to them or learning how to push back a bit. I think we have to continue to refine our education in that area. And then obviously how we, keep things consistent. But then again, ensure that all sport programs are gaining some opportunities from NIL and that it's not all being moved into one direction towards just 1 or 2 particular sports, and making sure that our female student athletes are having the same opportunities, and we're at least doing what we can to put them on the biggest stage to make sure that they're maximizing their NIL.
Absolutely. We're both track student athletes. We want all the track athletes to get some great deals too. Well, when it comes to the future of regulation, who should own this? Is this something that the NCAA needs to come back in on? Is this going to take congressional support, state level support, or is this something that the conferences themselves could take over?
You know, it's hard to say right now. It's hard to pinpoint because you're seeing different entities try to have some support, but it seems like we could do something within our conferences, at least as far as I've read, and I know the commissioner has put some things out there that have kind of spoken along those lines. We feel great about our state law, and we've been able to govern based on that, but you'd think that maybe you'd begin at the conference level and then hopefully be able to see something from an NCAA or a national standpoint. So we'll see.
Well, as we talk about how much staff is needed to address NIL and how you are that hub of the wheel, and we talk about burnout, how are you, Terry Prentice, really balancing all of these different priorities on your plate? What does work-life balance look like for you right now?
Yeah, having a team of individuals support you that's been amazing for me, and it's been a way to take a burden off of my plate. We've got 465 student athletes. Again, I mentioned we got 19 sports. We're in the SEC, so it can be quite demanding, but have some vacations planned this summer, able to decompress, get away, and again, having some team members be able to pick up the responsibilities when you're away is certainly key, but definitely have to turn the phone off and get away for a little bit and see if I could, make sure my mental health is okay, and make sure you take some time for yourself and then recharge again and get into the fall.
Absolutely. Well, last big question for you. Let's combine your two big roles at Arkansas. How can NIL positively contribute to inclusive excellence, DEI efforts in college athletics?
So, I'm glad you asked that because I think we're already seeing it. I mentioned JD Note. He's a young man who, overcame homelessness, overcame some rough situations in his life. In middle school, parents weren't always around in a way, and we think about people coming from underprivileged backgrounds. Well, I think NIL is providing an opportunity and a gateway for some of those individuals to put some food on their table, or, in some instances, send that money back home, as we're seeing with some of our student athletes. And that's not always the case, but some of the things I think we've seen at the NIL Summit from, I think Black Girl Magic was mentioned, and some other initiatives that student athletes were able to generate themselves. That's awesome, and I think that's the essence and core of what NIL is supposed to be. So we've seen it already begin to make an impact on the diversity and inclusion space.
I love it. We are so excited to wrap up this exciting year one and to leap forward into year two. Terry Prentice, thank you so much for joining us and for giving us all of this excellent insight into where we're going in this space.
Thanks for having me.